Hello there, hockey fans. Well, as I sit here, what a year, and this reverse retro, yes, this is it, the reverse retro of ours we had on. It's time to look back on the first half of the season. I'm still hyped up by that. I'm still very much in awe of that All-Star game. It was crazy. I was really hoping the Central would pull it out. We have still not won that tournament. Now we're the only division that has it, because the Atlantic won for the first time. But I was proud of how the Avs players did. The three that got in: McKinnon, McCarr, and of course Rantanen. It was something else. The whole thing was just an amazing. It was just an amazing game. It was just absolutely. It was a sight to see. I always love the NHL All-Star game. And I do love this division format, the tournament, the 3-on-3, and of course it was in Sunrise. It was in Sunrise, Florida. The Panthers hosted. And of course, next year it's going to be in Toronto. That should be interesting. We'll definitely see Austin Matthews in it. Hopefully he'll be healthy, because he was selected this year, but he got injured, I think, about a week or so ago and couldn't play. Alexander Barkov replaced him. So the Panthers had two representatives, Barkov and Matt Tkachuk, who ended up being the MVP, and was on the line with little brother Brady Tkachuk. That was fun. I think he had 7 points combined. 5 in the Metro Atlantic game alone. Crazy. Dylan Larkin scored 5 goals in that overall too. It was just amazing spectacle. But anyway, so All-Star game's over now. The second half of the season starts Monday, and it's time. Let's just look at this at the playoff picture entering the second half. Of course, we're all almost at that time. We are at that time to talk playoffs, but the real drive for the postseason starts next month. Starts in March. NHL March Madness. I always love it. But here we go. So in the Western Conference, it's all here in the NHL app. The Western Conference, the Stars, the only competent team in Dallas after what the Mavericks happened with the Mavericks. The Stars are number one in the West. Though the West has been kind of, well, not mediocre, but it hasn't been kind of strong this year. Dallas is number one in the West. They lead the Central with 66 points. The Winnipeg Jets, who people tried to tell me, and I'll never forget this, people tried to tell me the Jets aren't going to be a playoff team this year. I said during the offseason, Jets are going to be in the Central top 3, and they thought it was crazy. They're not going to the playoffs. They didn't make any changes. They didn't need to, because they are 1 point behind Dallas in the standings. They didn't need to make any changes. They still have one of the best goalies in the league. They got a pretty good deep core. They're pretty good. And of course, and Minnesota is barely hanging on to third place in the Central at 58 points. They've been slumping. That team is not I'll never forget how flabbergasted I was with the Wild when I watched the Wild in the playoffs, because I thought the Wild were a deep team, and they're not. They're really not. In the Pacific, the Seattle Kraken released the Kraken. The Kraken are in first place. I'm literally giddy that the Kraken are leading the Pacific, because I was kind of hoping the sophomore year would see, well, they'll get better and they'll probably get in the playoffs. Though I kind of had them be I kind of thought if they got in, it would be like a wild card. Instead, they're leading the division, and they kind of got some good acquisitions in the offseason. One of them being Andrei Burakovsky, who I still miss with the Avs. And they've been doing it, though. They're going to have a tough time, though, because Matty Beniers, their star rookie, he's injured. He was supposed to be the All-Star game, too. But, it's actually a tie in points between the Kings and the Kraken, but Seattle has 4 games in hand. LA's been working. They played 53 games. I think they played more games than I just looked. They played more games than everybody except Washington. But they played 53 games, which means they'll run out of time. But they are tied for first in points, but Seattle has that edge. Vegas is 1 point. Vegas is 1 point behind both teams with 62 points. So that's your Pacific top three. I'm not surprised about Vegas because Vegas had to be pissed off after actually missing the playoffs last year for the first time in their short franchise history. So they're out. They're pretty much out for payback. It looks like they're getting it. The wild card positions: Edmonton and Colorado. Yeah, the last two teams remaining from the Western Conference last year, they're in the wild card position. It's been kind of hard. It's been hard for us though. I mean, it's a mix of cup hangover and injuries. We've been banged up for pretty much most of the season, but we've kind of thrived. We had a winning tear entering the break, and we moved up above the playoff line. Though we're barely hanging on to that because Calgary has the same number of points with 57. We have 57. Thing is, we have 2 games in hand, so that's keeping us ahead of the Flames. But at least we have the injury excuse. What's up with Edmonton? That team is not banged up at all. They're just not playing well. The goaltending has been a disaster. Jack Campbell, who they got from Toronto, everybody scores on him. They've been relying on Stuart Skinner, and it's just been a hard luck for the Oilers. But But they are close to third place in the Pacific. And the same goes for the Avs. The Avs are close to third place in the Central, so it's going to be pretty interesting this second half, these final, equivalent of 2 months of the season. But it should really be interesting. Like I said, Calgary's right behind the line, so are the Predators. The Blues, you don't know which Blues team you're going to get. They are 8 points behind us. And I kind of think they might be on another low. It's either a really big low or a really high tear. There's no gray area with this team, and that's really not a good thing because you need an identity, especially in hockey. And Vancouver, well, they're getting what they deserve. They're screwed. In the East, oh boy. I talked about how I was dead right about the Jets when everybody else said the Jets would be a playoff team. This is the opposite. What I'm about to say is the opposite because I, for some reason, said Boston wasn't going to make the playoffs this year. And I base it on this belief that they were a one-line team, that they live and die by the perfection line, and nobody else can be trusted on this team. 39, 7, and 5. 83 points. They clinched a winning season before the break. That's how amazing their season has been. They clinched a winning season. Of course, a winning season in an 82-game season is 83 points. That means even if they lose the rest of their games in regulation, they'll still have a winning record. So they clinched a winning season before All-Star break. Yeah, and they clinched it on February 1st, which was the last day before the break, because they beat Toronto, who is 13 points behind, but has a great record, 31, 13, and 8, and 70 points. Tampa Bay, who's trying to get back to the final for the 4th year in a row. Tampa Bay is 65 points. They've been kind of but they're doing all right. They're doing pretty much like we expected. In the Metro, the Hurricanes with 76 points leading the division ahead of the Devils, who were really contending with Boston for the best record, but they've fallen off a bit. They're at 68. The Rangers, I think they fixed their issues from earlier in the season. They have 62 points. They're in the top 3. The wild card slots are occupied by Washington and Pittsburgh, and when it comes to Pittsburgh, it's barely. It is barely. I don't know what the hell is wrong with the Penguins. I know part of it. Tristan Jarry's been out pretty much for most of the new year. And they've had to rely on DeSmith, who hasn't been lights out. Washington is not that deep anyway, but they're still going to make it somehow, as Ovi continues to get closer and closer to Wayne Gretzky. But look who's right behind Pittsburgh. The Sabres. Yeah. And a lot of people, myself included, kind of figured this would be a good year for Buffalo because look how last year ended. It's ironic. As soon as they traded Jack Eichel, the Sabres kind of started playing their game and winning a few games left to right. They did miss the playoffs, but it didn't look like the way they played and the way they ended things. It didn't look like something good was going to happen this year, and it is. They are 1 point. They are 1 point behind the playoff line. But they're in the Atlantic, and they are 9 points behind behind Tampa, who is currently occupying third place. So I think they have a better shot occupying a wild card spot, though it would be something if they do make it to the top three. But yeah, the Sabres have the longest current playoff drought in the NHL. They've not made the playoffs since 2011. Think about how long ago that was. The 2010-2011 season. The Atlanta Thrashers were still around, barely. That was their last year in Atlanta. But and these players were not in the league. McKinnon, Matthews, McDavid, Eichel, Draisaitl, they weren't in the league yet. But yeah, the Islanders are 2 points. The Islanders are 2 points out because they got Bo Horvat in that trade with Vancouver, and they just signed him to an 8-year deal. Florida has been badly struggling, but they are 3 points behind the line. But if they miss the playoffs, something's got to change because they made that deal with Calgary and they've been falling off. Remember, this is the team that won the President's Trophy last year. Ottawa is 6 points out. I don't know about Ottawa. Will they make it? Won't they? We'll have to see. We'll have to see what the second half brings. Philly has 51. Detroit has 50. It's really only Montreal and Calgary Columbus. It's really only Montreal and Columbus who have no shot. And who had? I sound like the New Day. Who had Columbus with the worst record in the league? This is the team that got Johnny. They got Johnny Hockey. Everybody had them making the playoffs. Yeah, here they are, entering the second half, worst record in the league. They're actually tied with the Blackhawks for the lowest point total in the league with 34. But Chicago has 3 games in hand, so based on that, because of that tiebreaker, Columbus is number 32 in the league. The team that got Johnny Gaudreau during the offseason is number 32 in the league. Crazy. That's, as John Forsman says, that's hockey, baby. And that is my recap of the first half. The second half's going to be crazy. And I'm really excited for March. I love NHL March Madness, but that comes in a few weeks. If you like this video, click the like button. Click subscribe if you want more. My recap of the All-Star game on Vocals in the description below. So check it out when you can. Next week, I will recap the Super Bowl. And the next time I talk hockey on YouTube, it'll be when March begins. Because I'll get you ready for NHL March Madness. So stay tuned.